I have been a parent for 15 and a half years, almost 16 years. Parenting, I have 4 kids, so parenting kind of feels like being on a roller coaster where you're not sure if the harness works. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like you think maybe you won't die, but maybe you will, and you're just kind of holding on and holding your breath, and the adrenaline's kind of always pumping. Now, so 15 years is a long time. I have experience. That doesn't mean I'm good at it. It just means that I have experience at it. But every once in a while, I will talk to somebody who is like about to become a parent, or they just became a parent. You know, that fresh out of the box feel, and they like have these ideas of how they're going to parent. Have you ever talked to somebody like that? And like you should definitely have ideas. You should have plans. You should have all that. But sometimes when I talk to people who are like new to it or are about to step into it, I try not to laugh, because they say stuff like, well, my kids are never going to talk back to me. You better get some duct tape or something. Or my kids are never going to, eat red dye number 40. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it's in everything. Like they put it in vegetables now. It's just everywhere. Good luck. I'm never going to use a screen as a babysitter. Not going to do that. Okay. That sounds like a bad time. I'm never going to drive a minivan. Yeah, I wasn't either. They're awesome, by the way. I'm gonna dress my kid nice every single day. Okay. All right, man. Get it. Now you have again, I like it. I never want to crush anybody's idealism. I usually just smile and be like, all right, I hope you're better than me. You keep it going. But then usually you see them like 4 years later, rolling down the street in their Honda Odyssey, and they're like throwing McDonald's French fries in the back seat, like bird seed, and their 2 kids are actually on screens, but somehow still fighting with each other. And one has one sock on and the other's shirt's inside out, that whole scene. And it's interesting because that kind of happens to all of us, right? I think we all had plans of how something like that would go, and then, you meet reality and it ends up being very different. What's fascinating about that, though, is before they started and when they just started, their confidence level was really high, but their experience was low. But then, like rolling down the street in that minivan, the very messy minivan, their experience went up, but their confidence went way down. And it's actually kind of fascinating that less experience meant more confidence and more experience meant less confidence. And what's interesting is they were more confident than they should have been, but then probably less confident than they should be when they were in the thick of it. You probably feel like a worse parent than you actually are when you're actually doing it. And there's actually a term for this. It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's this bias that we all have where when we have low ability or knowledge in a certain area, you tend to overestimate your competence. But then with a higher ability and more experience, you tend to underestimate your ability. And the reason this happens is really interesting. The reason this happened is because the skills needed to be good at something are often the same skills needed to recognize good performance. Isn't that interesting? So the same skills you need to be good at the thing are the same skills you need to have an eye for what actually is good. So beginners don't realize what they don't know. And then as you gain experience, what happens is your confidence drops because the edges of your ignorance get pushed out and you start to realize what you don't know. And I find that really fascinating, that when you start something, you're overconfident because you don't know what you don't know. And then parenting is an example. When you get into it and you start to realize what you don't know, one of the things you don't realize when you first have kids is they're just always there. They're never not there. They're just always there. Like a slow drip of water, Chinese water torture. Just always there. And what that means is you're not always making decisions from the best place, right? Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, you're doing what you need to do. So principles get thrown out for the practical. And that just kind of happens, and you learn that as you go. So then you begin to underestimate your ability because of how much you realize that you didn't know. So we're in a series right now called Blind Spots. And we're looking at some common things in our life that are hard to see in the mirror. You can spot them in others, but you have a really hard time seeing it in yourself. And the blind spot we're going to look at today, I think, is the Christian's Worst blind spot. If you're a Christian, this is the worst blind spot that a Christian can have. And unfortunately, I feel like it's an epidemic in the Christian world. It's horribly common and horribly awful. I desperately want to shrink this blind spot in my life. I want you to shrink it in your life. But even more than that, I want to speak to us like as a church. Because the kind of church we're called to be, a church for people who don't think church is for them, the essence of that means that we need people to be able to come in here and feel like they belong while they're figuring out if they believe. Does that make sense? They need a space, they need some room. We need to give them some room to belong before they believe, because they're gonna figure out if they believe while they're here belonging. And that's gonna take a lot from us. And this blind spot today that we're gonna look at prevents that from happening. And we, as a church, can't do that. We can't do that. I'm not saying we can get rid of this blind spot completely, but we can't have it be pronounced either. We gotta shrink it. So this blind spot's found in the story that Jesus told in Luke chapter 18. Jesus said this in verse 10. 2 men went to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other was a despised tax collector. So if you stop right there, if you didn't grow up in church, you don't know like what Jesus is talking about here, these two characters that just laid out. Jesus intentionally just kind of gave two people on opposite ends of his culture's continuum. You got a Pharisee over here who's like really, really good, and then you have a tax collector over here who would be considered very, very bad. So he intentionally just gave us two people walking into the temple who immediately the listeners would have been like, all right, I know who the hero is and I know who the villain is. That's what they would have thought. But if you know anything about Jesus, he tends to flip things on their head. So verse 11, the Pharisee stood by himself and prayed this prayer. I thank you, God, that I am not like other people, cheaters, sinners, adulterers. I'm certainly not like that tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give you 1/10 of my income. Whew, okay, that's a prayer right there. Now, can we give him some credit? The first 4 words are good, right? If you start your prayers, I thank you, God, you have started in the right direction. He started in the right direction. He immediately did a 180, but he started okay. Now, 2 quick observations here. Well, before I do the 2 quick observations, he's spending his time, if you look at this thing, he's spending his time pointing out sins in others that he doesn't struggle with, and then pointing out the things that he's good at that other people might struggle with. Did you catch that? Like, he's very specific in the things he's bringing up. Sins that I don't struggle with that other people do, but the stuff that I'm good at that maybe other people might have a hard time with. That's like the only stuff he talked about. So 2 things. One, it says when it says he prayed this prayer, other translations actually say that he prayed to himself. He prayed to himself, which I think is interesting. So he wasn't really praying. He was more talking to himself about himself. And I want to caution you in your own prayers, if you're saying the word I a lot, just be careful. If in your prayer life the word I is just on repeat over and over again, you can slip into praying a prayer that sounds a little bit like this, where you might not be praying to God, you might just be talking to yourself, and I just want to caution you on that. So don't use the word I too much. And then secondly, this man got what he prayed for. And you're looking up there like, wait a minute, what did he pray for? Nothing. He prayed for nothing, and he got nothing. And that's, by the way, how prayer works. If you're not praying for it, there's something to this. So if you ask for nothing, you will actually get it. Now, compare that prayer to the next one in verse 13. But the tax collector stood at a distance and dared not even lift his eyes to heaven as he prayed. Instead, he beat his chest in sorrow, saying, "O God, be merciful to me, for I am a sinner." Now, immediately, I want to point this out to the listeners to this. Jesus is telling the story. There were people listening to the story. They right now kind of would have been surprised, because just eyeballing it, you can tell that this is a better prayer than the first one, right? You don't need Jesus to tell you that. You can kind of look at that and go, oh, okay. They're already a little surprised because the bad guy is praying a good prayer and the good guy is praying a bad prayer. And this really is an amazing prayer. Look at his posture. Physically, his head is down, he's beating his chest, and he's asking God for mercy, acknowledging that he is a sinner. And the word for mercy in the original language is actually only used twice in the New Testament. It's a pretty rare word, and it carries this idea that he's asking God to make up for what he's done. It's in a word for atonement. He's saying, hey, God, I've come up short. Can you make up the difference? Hey, God, I don't deserve anything from you, but I'm asking anyways. Hey, God, can you not give me what I deserve? Because it's actually really big. Can you not give me what I deserve? Like, that's the kind of thing he's praying for. He's praying for mercy in a place of humility. And then, did you see he called himself a sinner? But actually, again, you kind of miss it if you don't see it in the original language. He actually puts the word the in front of it. He calls himself the sinner. He's not just a random one. He's the sinner. It's like the Ohio State University. He's like, I am the sinner, okay? And that's how he viewed it. He is the worst one. And what Jesus is wanting you to see in these two things is like, hey, compare and contrast here. These two could not be more different, right? The posture of the two, the words of the two, the whole thing is opposites. The Pharisee says, I'm the best, I don't need nothing, God, right? I'm not even gonna ask for anything, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for making me awesome. And then this guy is like, actually, I'm the worst, and God, I need everything from you. I can't bring anything to the table. I can't make up for my shortcomings. I need you. So they are on opposite ends of this continuum. And then finally now we have Jesus gives his thoughts on the story in verse 14. Jesus says, I tell you, this sinner, not the Pharisee, returned home justified before God. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Now that, you need to understand that little verse right there would have been completely shocking to the crowd that was listening. You know that sound that your wife makes when she thinks you don't see the brake lights in front of the car? Do you know that sound? That one? And that actually causes the wreck, not the brake lights. you reacting to her making noises. That sound, look at all the husbands being real careful right now. Good on you. My wife's not here, so I can say what I want. That sound, you would have heard that from the crowd. When he said this, that was shocking, because he just made the hero into the bad guy and the bad guy into the hero of the story. He used the bad guy as the good example and the good guy as the bad example. It was a complete reversal. And let's be honest, here's the thing. If you grew up in church, this is what's weird about this, because we have so been trained to view the Pharisees as like the bad guys in stories, that like we're kind of like, well, we saw that coming, right? We knew the Pharisee was going to end up being the bad guy. But back then it was reversed. But I will say this, even though if you grew up in church and you're like, yeah, Pharisees are bad guys, we still have a hard time with the sentence, because to describe the story, what Jesus just said is the worst person is closer to God, and the better person is further away from God. And you're like, what? No, the good guy was actually walks away not justified before God, and the bad guy walked away justified. And we're like, I still have a hard time with that. Somebody who's worse could be closer, and somebody who's better could be further away. But that's what he just said. And what he's trying to get us to see is actually this blind spot that we all have a little bit of, and some of us have a lot of. This blind spot that I think, again, is like the worst blind spot that a Christian can have, a blind spot that our church has to get a hold of. And this blind spot is called self-righteousness. Self-righteousness. Now, again, if you grew up in church, I don't know how you've heard that term used. In my days as being a Christian, it's been used a lot of different ways. So I want to kind of define this so we're all on the same page. I don't want to just give you a sentence. I'm going to kind of describe what self-righteousness actually looks like. So self-righteousness, it's seeing your own sins as understandable and seeing other sins as abhorrent and inexcusable. It's judging yourself by your motives and judging others by their actions. It's judging yourself by your intent, how you hoped it would turn out, and judging others by the outcome, how it actually turned out. It's judging yourself by the sins you haven't committed. That's a long list, right? There's a lot of stuff I haven't done. But then it's judging others by the sins that they have committed. It's feeling better than anyone who sins differently than you. It's self-righteousness. It's a posture of moral superiority towards others because you think your brand of sin isn't quite as bad as their brand of sin. Self-righteousness is putting a spotlight on when you're looking at other people's faults, but then when you're looking at your own faults, you dim the lights. So you can see that self-righteousness greatly affects your relationship with others and your perception of others and the way you think about them and the attitude you have towards them, but it doesn't stop there. Unfortunately, self-righteousness also affects your relationship with God. What starts to happen when you become self-righteous is you feel like you don't need God as much. because all these other people obviously need him a lot, and you don't need him as much. So in its extreme, you see the Pharisee who's not even asking God for anything because he's like, I'm good compared to everybody else. So you come to this place where you stop even wanting anything from God. And then the other thing that happens when you become self-righteous, you expect God to like smite people when they sin against you. You know, you ever prayed a smiting prayer? You don't use that word, but you say other stuff. It's smiting. You want them to smite them when they sin against you. But then when you sin against other people, you know that God like totally understands where you're coming from. And it changes the way you pray about people. And the other thing that happens is you start to lose your gratitude for God. Because you think you're so good, you're like, actually, like, I'm not grateful anymore. I think I deserve the good stuff, God. Matter of fact, why are you giving them anything good when I'm better than them? So you have this entitled attitude that starts to grow when you become self-righteous. So what I want you to see is that self-righteousness is kind of like a double curse on your life. It affects the way you have relationships with other people, and it certainly affects your relationship with God. It's a double curse. Now, here's what you might be tempted to be thinking right now. You might be sitting there going, man, I hate those self-righteous people. They're the worst. They're the worst. I can't believe those people. And you might be starting to separate yourself from them. And I get it. Now you need to recognize the irony of that. Because if we start to be self-righteous towards self-righteous people, it's still self-righteousness. You understand that, right? Just you're doing it again. You're saying their sin is worse than yours. You're literally doing it while judging it. So be careful with that. But then the other thing you might be tempted to do is because you're sitting here thinking like, I know some self-righteous people. I've got this family member who's totally that. I've got this coworker who's totally that. I even got one of my friends. I don't even know why I'm friends with them. They're kind of that. And you might even have a list of people in your head right now who are super self-righteous. So what you would do is, and it's a very logical thing. I totally understand, and I want to do the same thing. Like, it's just makes sense. If I'm really good at spotting self-righteousness in others, then I'm good at spotting self-righteousness, right? I can see it. I can spot it from a mile away. And that means if I can see it in others, I can probably see it if I had it. So like, I'm good at spotting self-righteousness if other people have it, and I should be able to see it if I have it. And since I don't see myself as having it, then I probably don't have it. And that makes total logical sense. But I want to caution you. I want to beg you to slow down. Because that's actually not the way it works. Just because you can spot self-righteousness in others does not mean you can clearly see it in yourself. Just because you have a list of people who are like this does not mean you maybe aren't on the list too. Your ability to spot self-righteous people is no help spotting self-righteousness in yourself, is what I'm trying to get you to see. So don't use that as any kind of evidence. Like, well, I'm really good at spotting self-righteous people, so I'm probably not self-righteous. Actually, this is the weird thing. It might be the opposite. If you're really good at spotting self-righteousness in other people, you might actually have it more. I don't know if you know this, but that's actually kind of a trick. Like the stuff you're super sensitive to in other people, a lot of the times it's stuff that you struggle with. If you've ever talked to somebody who's like, man, no, I just can't stand prideful people, and you're sitting there going, dude, you can't? You're the most prideful one. Like that's the kind of the way it works. Like the biggest thing we can't stand in others is sometimes the thing that we struggle with the most. So if you're really good at spotting self-righteousness, I just want to caution you. So here's the deal. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to shift now. I pointed out what it is. I explained it to you. And now what I want to do is I want to talk about 2 ways to get rid of it. Just two. It's your whole list this week. Just 2 things. And you can listen to those one of 2 ways. It's your choice. You can be sitting there thinking, man, I hope the person next to me is listening. You can elbow them slightly. Just make it so that you're just adjusting yourself and just kind of hit them to make sure they're paying attention if you want. You could also just wait for the YouTube link and you can send it to people this week if you want. Hey, I thought of you. Not so subtle suggestion. It's up to you. You can listen to it that way. Or we could all acknowledge that, hey, this could be a thing. I might have a little bit of this. So I need to lean in and pay attention for me. It's up to you. I feel like this one's not as useful to you, and I feel like the more tempted you are to put this onto somebody else, maybe the more you need to put yourself into the I need this for me thing. So, 2 things to I want to say get rid of self-righteousness, but I don't know if it's possible to get rid of it completely. But let's say shrink it down. 2 things to shrink down your self-righteousness. Now, this first one's rough. I'm not going to lie to you. But I absolutely think it's necessary. So the first thing you need to do to shrink your self-righteousness is to grow in awareness of your own sin. To grow in awareness of your own sin. I know that's not like, oh, yay. So happy I came to church. Pastor's going to point out my sin. Yay. I'm not. You're going to point your own sin out, actually. And consider the story again. So if you look at the 2 people that Jesus presented in this story, the problem with the Pharisee was that he was focused on the sins that he didn't commit, right? He had this whole list of things that he didn't do, and he was super all about that. And did you notice that we don't know that he had any sin at all? Because he didn't talk about anything wrong that he ever did. He only focused on the stuff that he didn't do. And that focus on the sins that he didn't commit over the sins that he did was one of the contributing factors to this self-righteous attitude. So, and what I want to do, I want to point out how absolutely silly this is that we do this. And we do. I just want to point out how ridiculous it is. So this summer, me and my family are going to Florida for a vacation. In July. I know that's dumb. I don't know why. We used to go earlier in the year, and we kept going further south to make sure the weather was warm, and now we go later in the year, and we're still going further south. I don't know what we're thinking. Florida in July sounds like a terrible time. And I have 4 kids. Anyways, I looked up how far it is, and it's 1,032 miles. 1,032. That's a lot of are we there yet? I don't know if you know that. And if you don't have kids, that's not a lot. Like my kids for real say that. And they say it like we're like a half hour in, and they're like, are we there yet? I'm like, we're in Canton. Do you think does this look like Florida to you? Like, I hope not. Come on. But they really do. So we got a long way to go there. So it's 1,032 miles. Now, so so that's north, right? And this is south. So Florida's south. So check this out. Look at me. I'm closer to Florida than you. You look so stupid over there. So far north. I should put swim trunks on and flip-flops, drink out of a coconut over here. I don't know what you're doing up there so far north. How's the weather? Is it raining? Yeah. I'm so far south, you're so far north. Do you hear that? Look, oh no, I'm coming back. Look, I fixed it. Man, it's like 30 feet. I can't believe how far north you guys are. Do you see how stupid that sounds? Are we there yet? That's the ironic part, right? Now, the reason we laugh at that is because it's so crazy, the discrepancy between me and Florida, for me to focus on the difference between me and you, right? We're talking 1,032 miles, and I'm caught up on the 30 feet. That's the silliest thing ever to focus on. So what if being self-righteous is kind of the same way? That if instead I were to focus on the 1,032 miles that I have to go, I wouldn't even notice the difference between me and you. If you back up and look at the map, we're the same, right? We're the exact same. Your little blue dot, they'd be right on top of each other. You wouldn't notice the difference. But if I'm all caught up on that 30 feet, it just makes no sense. So listen to me. In your spiritual life, the more aware you are of the distance between your goodness and God's goodness, the less aware you are going to become of the distance between your goodness and someone else's goodness. Do you follow? Does that make sense? That the distance between your goodness and God's goodness is actually much greater than the distance between us and Florida right now. You're further than 1,000 miles away from God, okay? He's that much better. And it's absurd for us, considering the distance between us and God, to turn around to somebody else and be like, I'm closer to God than you. That's silly. It's absurd. The focus there makes no sense. And from God's perspective, he's looking at you going, are you serious? You're talking about this? You're talking about a couple of feet when there's miles? Like what, thousands? Like, that's insane. So it's a matter of focus. That's why growing in awareness of your own sin, growing in awareness of the distance between you and God can help get rid of self-righteousness. Because if you understand the distance between you and God, you'll focus much less on the distance between you and other people. And so this leads to another thing, and this is really important. It's a strangely well-kept secret in the Christian world. But I actually think that Christian growth and maturity work the opposite of the way most people think that it does. I think most people think that when you become a mature Christian, that you feel like more of a good person. That you, like, once you reach a certain stage, that you're gonna be like, man, I'm just good, and I feel good, and I feel clean, and I feel like I'm doing a lot of good stuff. And they think that you'll arrive at some point where you feel that way. But I wanna tell you that I actually believe the opposite. That I think as you grow closer to God, actually one of the things that happens is you become more aware of your sin. And that what happens is even if you start to get rid of some of the big ones and you start to lay some stuff down because Jesus is working on you, that you realize that underneath that layer is a whole nother layer, and underneath that layer is a whole nother layer, and you start to realize the depth of just how bad you are. And so as you grow closer to God, you actually become more aware. And I think this plays out, because think about this. Like right now we could say Florida's not that far. Florida's not that far, But I promise you, when I get to like North Carolina, I'm gonna be like, dude, Florida is like forever away. This is ridiculous, it's so far. Because I'm actually on the journey now. And I actually feel what it's like to try and get that far. And that's the way it works. That's where this Dunning-Kruger comes in, because when you first start off, you're like, Christianity's not that big of a deal. What's so hard? And then as you're trying to love people, and as you're trying to grow, and as you're trying to learn, and you're on that journey, then you start the edges of your ignorance start to go out, and you start to realize just how far you have to go, and you're actually gonna feel worse. And the way I always like to describe it is a person who's far away from a light source might look down and be like, I'm pretty clean. But as you get closer and the light gets brighter, you look down and you're like, oh boy, okay, I'm not. And that's what happens. As you get closer to God, you're gonna realize more and more, He is holy and perfect, and I am not. You might start to say stuff like, I am the sinner. Matter of fact, most of us would probably, if you were asked to make a list of the greatest Christian to ever live, I bet you most of us would have the Apostle Paul at the top of that list, right? That dude was it. He was the guy. Well, he literally said, I am the chief of sinners. That was Paul's words. So Paul, the guy who we would consider the best, he looked at himself and said, I'm the worst. So again, I think this plays out. The closer you get to God, the more you're gonna be like, I can't believe Jesus died for me. Like, this is nuts. Like, he died for me. He died for me? That's what it means to be a mature Christian. And again, I think when you really get it, when you really start to see it, you're gonna realize how silly it is to compare this distance when you know how far you have to go. It doesn't make any sense. So I say this with as much love as I can, because if you've ever said this, I'm not trying to be mean, but I do want to open your eyes to something. If you're a Christian and you say to me, well, I'm a pretty good person. Okay, I get what you're saying is like, hey, I'm like 30 feet further. And I get it. But I hear that like the same way I hear my 8-year-old, when my 8-year-old, like he's into basketball right now, he literally said to me, I think it was this morning, he was like, I'm almost as good of a shooter as Steph Curry. Not a joke, dead serious, straight face. I'm like, okay, you still have the hoop set at 8 foot, but little difference there. But like for me, when a Christian says I'm a pretty good person, I'm like, you just told on yourself. You just told on yourself that means you can't be very further along. Because if you're further along, you would know. That is super not true. That how God defines good, you are nothing close to that. Nothing close to that. And you would have a whole different perspective on yourself. So careful throwing that around. And again, I understand what you mean. But man, if Paul says he's the chief of sinners, then that's the direction, is a growing awareness of our own sin. So that's the first thing. If you want to shrink your self-righteousness, become more and more aware of the distance between you and God, and you will become less and less aware of the distance between you and other people. It'll just happen automatically. And here's the second thing, and this is equally important. You can't do the first one without the second one, because you get depressed if you just look at the first one and not the second one, because the second one is the perfect answer to the first one. The second thing you need to do to shrink your self-righteousness is to grow in your understanding of God's grace. To grow in your understanding of God's grace. Grace is the thing that separates Christianity out from everything else. Because if grace wasn't real, then you continuing to believe that you're a horrible, like a worse and worse person, that actually feels like you're going in the wrong direction. But since grace is true, then this is great news. Because that means God's going to give us something that we don't deserve. His goodness, His kindness, His salvation. And I know we throw this word around a lot. If you grew up in church, we use the word grace so much. We name our kids it. We name other things grace. There's so many things that have grace in the name that like it almost might start to cause us to lose the meaning, and we can't. If you lose grace, you lose Christianity. You're doing something else. So let me show you, I think, some of the most important verses for this. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9. God saved you by His grace when you believed. And you can't take credit for this. It is a gift from God. Listen, verse 9, it's so important. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we have done. So none of us can boast about it. If you want to shrink your self-righteousness, memorize these verses. Let these verses sink into your soul. Because He just said that you don't stand before God based off your goodness, right? He said it was a gift. And then He doubled down. He's like, hey, why would I bring that up? Salvation is not a reward for the good things you've done. It wasn't what you did that makes you stand right before God. It's what Jesus did that makes you stand right before God. So none of us can boast about it. I think that's another way of saying, so nobody can be self-righteous? What are you doing? What are you doing talking about the difference between you and somebody else? God is the one who said, He walked 1,000 miles this way. He came to us. He died for us. A self-righteous attitude makes no sense when you start to realize this. Do you realize when you're standing in heaven, just imagine like 1,000 years from now, you're standing in heaven, there's just a sea of people. Say you turn to the person next to you and go, hey, why are you here? You know nobody's gonna say, well, I'm here because I'm awesome. I lived an awesome life and I did so many good things that God was like, you're in. Nobody's gonna say that. Exactly 0 people in heaven are gonna have that story. Every single person in heaven, if you ask them, why are you here? They're going to say, because Jesus died for me. He paid for everything and I'm here. Here I am. He was merciful to me, the sinner, chief of sinners. We're all going to argue over who was the worst and how much God's love covered that. That's the story. That's what Christianity is God died for sinners, of which that's me. That's me. You stand before God justified, right, pure, clean because of what Jesus did for you, not because of what you've done for God. It is Jesus' resume, not yours. See, here's what I think happens though. When you became a Christian, you got that, right? That's what happens when you become a Christian. So you have this realization, I can't, God can. I'm a sinner and I can't climb my way to God. Like that's what starts to happen. That's one of the things that you kind of break down on. Like I can't do it. I can't climb this ladder. And that's how it starts. And then you realize, well, you don't have to climb the ladder because Jesus climbed down. And you realize that He died for you. He loved you right where you were. And that's grace. He gives you his love. He loves you right where you are. You didn't deserve a thing. And He loved you first and forgave you of everything and invited you into a relationship. You got that when you became a Christian. But what happens is, as we go, and it probably happens at different times for everybody, but you hit a certain point where something starts to shift in your mind. And instead of thinking that salvation is a free gift, you start to think of it like it's a loan. Like it's a loan. Paul said it was a gift, but now your mentality is, well, I got a really low interest rate, but I got to pay this thing back. And you start to think that you've got to do good things to pay God back. And I get it, there's some part of that has something noble in it, but if you think you're paying God back, that's absurd. You can't. And the reason it's a little bit dangerous to think that it's not a loan, it's a gift. You can't pay it back, it's too big. The reason that's dangerous is because if you start to think you can pay it back, then your attitude towards others can be, well, I've paid off my loan a little further than you have. Matter of fact, it looks like you've missed some payments over here. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could start to do the self-righteous thing, even if you think God gave you the thing and then you're trying to pay him back. It's dangerous. Now, here's the thing. If you're like, okay, but why would I do good then? That's the beautiful part of Christianity. And this is the part that Christians aren't getting this. You don't do good stuff so God doesn't get you. If he wanted to get you, you'd be got, okay? He's got real good aim. He doesn't need to line up a shot. He could have got you, okay? You're not doing good things out of shame and condemnation and guilt. What the Bible says is that when you realize that you're a sinner saved by grace, that when you realize that God poured out his love on you and you didn't deserve it, that is actually supposed to draw you to live the way he wants you to live. That's the motivation. It's not fear, it's not shame, it's not condemnation. It's love that draws you to live the way he wants you to live. So you're not dropping all this stuff because you're scared of him. You're dropping all this stuff out of your life because you can't believe he loved you right where you were. I'm blown away by that. I want to give him my whole life. And yeah, there's some things that are hard for me to let go of, certainly. But the more I realize how much he loved me right where I am, and that somehow he hasn't given up on me yet, I just want to keep giving him stuff. I want to live however he wants me to live. It's love that draws us. It's a gift. It's free. Jesus paid it all, Christian. You're not paying that back. You're responding to his love. So listen. The person who sins differently than you, Jesus died for their sins the same as yours. Same as yours. The person who sins more than you, Jesus died for their sins, same as yours. There's no difference. There's no difference. And you never graduate from that grace. Stop acting like, well, the moment I become a mature Christian, I'm not going to need God's grace anymore. Stop it. You never are not going to need it. You're never going to graduate. You're never going to move on to some other more advanced thing. I actually think that your goal should be to continue to grow in your depth and understanding of how deep his grace is. That's maturity. You're not moving past it. You're growing into it. And then what happens, and this is the thing you have to realize, if you really get these two things, if you can get these two things, oh man, if you can understand just how big your sin is, and then you can understand just how big his grace is. If you can get these two things, something happens inside of you. And it's like magic. It's so spiritual and supernatural, you wouldn't even believe it, this explosion that happens in your soul. Once I realize how great of a sinner I am and how great of a Savior he is, I don't have to pretend with you anymore. Do you know how freeing that is? To say that I don't have to fake it anymore. Because the God of the universe loves me right where I am. Now, he loves me way too much to leave me here, but he loves me right where I am. And if he loves me and he has decided that I am justified before him based off what Jesus did, no offense, what do I care what you think? I'm standing before God clean. That's the most important. You know how freeing that is? And then not only that, it changes not only the way I perceive you looking at me, but it also changes my perception of you. Because now I realize that I'm standing before God for the same reason you are. That's not my resume. My resume doesn't matter. Your resume doesn't matter. So now I can look at you and say, hey, you're a sinner saved by grace. I'm a sinner saved by grace. We're both 1,000 miles from God. And he loves us anyways. What a freeing thing that is. I don't got to compare resumes anymore. I don't got to compare distances anymore. We look at him and we see what he's done for us and we're free. Just love each other and build his kingdom and not worry about all that. And it also is freeing in my relationship with him. How crazy is it that God's love for me doesn't change if I have a bad day or a bad week or a bad month? Do you realize how amazing that is? That he loves me right where I am, no matter what I do? That I don't have to run away from him and hide for a while and then come back because he died for me. I stand before him because of what Jesus did. That's crazy. By the way, that's a little test for you to see how much you are really understanding God's grace. When you sin, are you able to run right back to him? Or do you run away and stay away for a while because you feel like you have to beat yourself up for a while? That means you don't get it. It's not your doing that causes you to be able to walk into that throne room. It's what Jesus did that enables you to stand before God clean. And that's the crazy thing. Again, the most freeing thing in the world is to be able to work and live from God's love rather than for it. I don't have to work for his love. I can work from it. I'm not running from shame and guilt. He eliminated that. I can walk free and clean before the God of the universe. It's the most freeing thing in the world. And if you're not a Christian yet, that's the offer, by the way. I don't know what you've heard about what it means to be a Christian, but what it means to be a Christian is to recognize that you're a sinner. So that is the first part. And my guess is you kind of know that. It's the only one you can empirically prove. You could test it. You could ask some people, you know you're not perfect. You know you've got stuff. But the place you're going to have to come to is this place where not only do you realize you're a sinner, but you come to the conclusion that you can't reach God. You can't climb that ladder to heaven. You can't be good enough. And you kind of have to come to this place where you just stop. And then the second thing is you look at Jesus, and Jesus says, hey, I understand you can't climb the ladder. That's why I climbed down. I understand you can't live a perfect life. That's why I did. And Jesus dies for you. And he gives you his goodness. And so it's not your goodness anymore. It's God's goodness. And now when God looks at you, he sees Jesus. And you can make, that's the offer, is that now you can live without shame, without guilt, without condemnation. That the God of the universe loves you because of what Jesus did for you, and he forgave you for everything. That's the offer. To live a guilt and shame-free life because the God of the universe loves you. And you can do that right now. You can start that relationship right now. All you got to do is break, surrender. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my sin. Jesus, I can't, you can. Jesus, I need your forgiveness. You can pray that prayer. You can live that free life. Now, I want to point out one more thing, and this is for us as a church. I want to show you the harshest thing that Jesus said to a self-righteous person pretty much ever, in my opinion. It's in Matthew 23, verse 13. What sorrow awaits you teachers of the religious law and you Pharisees, there they are again, hypocrites. For you shut the door of the kingdom of heaven in people's faces. You won't go in yourselves, and you don't let others in either. Jesus paints this picture of a self-righteous person like being a bouncer in heaven. You know what I'm saying? Like the gates of heaven are there, and they're like, nope, sorry, you can't come in. Nope, you aren't good enough. Nope, you don't sin the right way, sorry. But what he also said about them is that not only are they not letting other people in, they're not going in themselves. It's the worst thing that they could do. And listen to me, church, this is so important because I think Christians can kind of act this way. That we kind of have this standing, like guarding the gate kind of an attitude, like, well, if you sin like that, I'm sorry, you can't come. Like, what? I thought he died for like all the sin, not just some of the sin, not just the sins that you think are bad. No, he died for all of them, all of them. So again, what we're trying to do, if you're not clear on what kind of church this is, we're trying to do is create an environment where someone can come in who hasn't figured it out yet. They're curious about Jesus. They might not fully understand all the stuff. They haven't come to a conclusion yet, but they need a place to come and belong for a while. And we want to create a place where they can belong while they're figuring out if they believe. And for us, that requires us to not be self-righteous. That requires us not to look at the person sitting across the room and be like, well, those people are in here. Oh yeah, they are. All of the kind, we got all brands here. You don't know. We got them all. I freaking love that. That's heaven, man. Everybody's going to be up there going, the only reason I'm here is because of Jesus. That's what we should all be saying, by the way. Don't you come in here and be like, well, I'm here because, shut up. If the answer is not Jesus, then stop it. Stop it. If you see your duty is to like run people off who sin different than you, get out. I was going to say something else. Get out. We're not doing that here. To me, that's the scariest thing. I don't want to get to heaven and have Jesus say to me, hey, your attitude, your words, your actions actually cause somebody to run from me. For me, that's the worst. That's the worst thing we could do. Worst thing we could do. That's not the kind of church we're trying to be. And I need you to understand, I know that's messy what I'm asking for. I know that. But I think that's what Jesus called us to. It's not the healthy you need a doctor, people, it's the sick. Isn't that what he said? That's what we're trying to create here. A place where the sick can come in and we're gonna love them right where they are. And we're going to hope that the love of God breaks into their heart and the miracle of miracle happens. That somebody could be sitting here or sitting in a small group somewhere and that their heart could just break and that salvation could come and the miracle of miracles come, that the Holy Spirit will come and live inside of them and their eternal destiny will be changed. I want to see that happen over and over and over again. And it doesn't just happen black and white. We have to be patient with people. We have to love people right where they are. And we can't act like we're better than them. Our attitude is we are beggars who have found bread, and we want to bring them in and help them find bread too. We can't act like we're better. So you want to shrink your self-righteousness, be aware of your own sin, and grow in your understanding of God's grace. Stand up with me. Let's pray. Lord, you're amazing. I don't know why you're so patient with me. I'm blown away again and again that you love me and that you're still here. It is your grace, your grace, your grace. Lord, I pray for the Christian right now who struggled with looking down on others because they sin different. Lord, I pray that you would break their heart right now. Lord, I pray if there's somebody here who thinks it's their job to keep the church pure, that you would help them find a new church, Lord. I pray that this place would be a place that you wouldn't walk in here and like have those harsh things to say, that you would find a hospital for sinners, that you would find a bunch of people who have the attitude, I was a beggar looking for bread and I found some and I want other people to find it too. I pray that that would be the attitude you would find in this place. And that we would be so blown away by your grace, so blown away by how good you've been to us, that we would be drawn to you, that we would want to live the way you want us to live. Not because it's some list of rules, but because you loved us right where we are and we know you love us enough to lead us towards your goodness. I pray for that person who hasn't surrendered their life to you yet, Lord. I pray that they would just give them a glimpse of how amazing it is to drop their sin and have a free and clear, open relationship with you. I pray that they would break right now and see you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.